All right, hi everyone. This is Alex from China App team. Welcome to today's webinar, and the topic today is about how to win in the US market. As you can see, there are different languages on this slide because this session will be presented by 4 different teams: Japan, Korean, China, and Vietnam. And here's the agenda for today's session. So the first part is about the market overview, and the second part is about US strategy in this market. And then the last one, which is very important one, is about the vertical insights. So we will give you a deep dive into education, finance, and tools and utility. And without further ado, let's get started.
Hey everyone, my name is Neil. I'm from the APAC IGT team, and today I'm going to be talking a little about the US market, some amazing and interesting insights about the app business over there, and then we can just do a quick deep dive on the fintech market. So the first thing I like to start off with is some numbers, some interesting numbers. So as you can see, the population of the US is around 328 million, and this makes it actually one of the largest countries in the world. But what is more interesting is we see that the mobile user population is extremely massive, around 241 million. And the total revenue generated only from apps, not games, just apps, stands around $26 billion. That's massive. It's actually the largest in the world. And the most interesting point is the revenue year-on-year growth stands at 46%. So that's a very good sign. It means that there's a lot of incremental revenue that's being generated across all of these verticals. Finally, the one last point I want to touch down is the split between Android and iOS. We see that iOS contributes to almost 60% of the entire market share. This is unlike most other markets where the Android portion is slightly larger. So that's a point that we need to keep in mind. Now let's look at what sort of verticals or subcategories are on the rise. Well, overall, if we look at the overall picture, what we can see is that the downloads have not shown as much of growth, from 2020 to 2021. But we see that revenues have grown really fast. So that's a very interesting point over here. But if we look at the categories that grew the fastest year on year, when we specifically look at the revenue, we can see categories such as meet new people, live video sharing, as well as comics and manga and social that are growing. What is Meet New People? Meet New People is a hybrid between dating and live video streaming. So it's where you match up with random people and you can actually have a video conversation. So it's sort of like friendship slash dating, but a very new and interesting upcoming vertical. We see live video streaming, which is nothing new, growing quickly as well. And finally, a couple new verticals, one being comics and manga. We see it's growing very fast in the US, although the size of the business is smaller. So that's what we see overall from a subcategory point of view. Now, when we look at monetization, as I touched upon, that, it's growing 46% year on year. There are some certain subcategories that are growing. We try to look into the reasoning and the logic as to why it's growing so fast. So the first thing we look is we see that the subscription model is actually growing very quick. If we look at the top categories where subscription model is dominant, we see photography, health, fitness, and music, right? These are categories that historically have been strong in subscription. But we also see utilities, lifestyle also growing very quickly as far as subscription is concerned. So a lot of apps have started to move not only from an IAP, IA, but also into subscription business models. The next thing we see is higher engagement and retention. So if we look at 2017, 65% of the users transacted in an app once and then left the app. But let's go to 2020. We see that 53% of the users are actually making repeated purchases, one purchase after another. So what does this mean? It means that getting a user is important, but what is more important is retaining that user and engaging that user, because we know that once they make a purchase in the app, there's a very high chance that they will make repeated purchases within the app. So please keep this in mind: re-engagement and retention. Finally, the third point, look at the graph. 2017, we see that majority of the transactions, around 76% of the transaction, happened on the cheapest SKU, which is around $0 to $10. But now look at 2020, we see that there's a huge growth in the $10 to $50. That means these IAP packs or SKUs are increasing in value. One of the reasons is users find apps richer in content and more valuable, and hence they're ready to actually pay more money. So that also again points to the fact that it's very important to retain your users, engage your users, and hope that they keep investing in higher value SKUs. Next, we also want to look at some creative points of view. We see that the US, has more installs on longer video formats and a high ratio for landscape images. What do I mean? If you look at the graph on the left, we want to compare three markets: the US, India, and Japan. If we look at the bottommost, the darkest portion, it refers to video lengths 0 to 6 seconds, or what we call bumper videos. We see that these are extremely popular in Japan as compared to the US. Now, what is popular in the US? The portion in the middle, 47% of videos are around 10 to 20 seconds. So they are of medium length, not too short, not too long. When we look at the image ratio, aspect ratio, specifically in the US, we see a lot of the images are actually landscape, actually fairly similar to that of Japan. So these are interesting points when we try to look into what sort of creatives fly along in the US. Now, let's look at some points about audiences. If we look at this amazing pie chart, we see that 20% of the population of the US is Gen Z, what we call between the ages of 18 and 24, 26. But what is more interesting is if we dive deeper into what Gen Z is, we see that more than 25% of Gen Zs are actually Hispanic or non-white. So we see that Gen Z is extremely diverse. If we only look at the adult population, let's take out the children and let's take out infants, we see that Gen Z almost accounts for 44% of adult population. So that's like 30 million plus. So this is an extremely important subset of audiences in the US. Now, one interesting point that we also saw over here is that Gen Zs spend a lot of time on multiple social networks. But if we look at Gen Zs, if we compare Gen Z and non-Gen Z populations, which is the blue and the red, we see that Gen Zs have a way higher index on two platforms, specifically YouTube and Instagram. And they have a very low index compared to non-Gen Z on Facebook. So these are actually some very interesting points when we look at how Gen Zs interact and how they spend their time, because that's an important fact to learn. Finally, we try to understand more about habits of Gen Z. So if you look at the graph on the left, we see that 18 to 24, that is Gen Z, 47% of them have used some sort of AR features in the app. Now, by AR features, it could be filters, for some sort of TikTok or photography app, or it could even be, in something similar to Pokemon, etc. Right? So we can see that Gen Zs are extremely adept at using new age technologies. Now, if you look at the graph on the right, it states that 52% of Gen Zs in the US have actually already engaged in some sort of fintech app, and it's growing by 14%. So this is a very interesting point where we see that Gen Z is leading fintech adoption in the US. They're also eager to invest cryptos. I'm going to talk a little later about the growth in fintech apps and the growth in all sorts of stock investment apps, which is being led by Gen Z. Now, with this, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Yoshi from Google Japan. From here, I would like to introduce user acquisition strategy in US. There are many types of products in app campaign, and you need to consider the appropriate strategy for each phase of exporting to US. First, if you're planning to launch your Android app in the US and will be releasing it with a different app ID from domestic one, please use app campaign pre-registration. At the launch phase, which is the most important moment for your app, we recommend using max installs to maximize opportunity within your budget and get as many users as possible. Also, even if you set target CPI with AC install, please set a high target to expand the chance at an early stage. Once you acquire enough users in the launch phase and your app has become popular, let's aim for users with higher retention and in-app conversion rate. The perfect product for this solution is AC Action, which optimizes in-app events. AC Value is also good at this point, since it's automatically bid to achieve the ROAS you set. If your users stop using your app, you can then try AC engagement to make them to come back. By conducting these strategies, you can boost your user acquisition in the US from the beginning and also get more users over time. Now, which of the product I just introduced is used the most? The answer is AC Action, which is very important no matter what phase your app is in. Another notable fact is that more US developers are starting to target the ROAS goal by using AC Value. It is already used more than max installs, and we expect it to overtake TCPI's percentage by the end of this year. If your app launches successfully in the US, we'll recommend you to try an AC Value campaign. Next, let's look at what items need to be localized for export. Add creatives, store descriptions, text, and voiceovers in your app. They're all important to prepare before you start export. In this session, I'd like to highlight ad creatives, which will be the first point of contact with US audience. As you can see, text and videos are especially important to succeed in the US app market. I will introduce the best practices for these assets. Regarding to text assets, you need to include all 4 components in your headlines or descriptions. They are introduction, attention grabber, benefit statement, and call to action. Introduction is a short phrase which describes your app in a simple way. Next is attention grabber. To come up with good attention grabber sentences, we recommend imagining the current challenges and needs of your target audience. Benefit statements highlight the feature in your app that make it unique from other apps. Call to action is often forgotten, but please be sure to include the statement that encourages people to download your app. Regarding to text asset practice, first and most important point is to cover all the video aspect ratio to give chance for your ads to be shown in all available networks. They are landscape, portraits, and squares. Also, by capturing the user's interest in the first 2 seconds, you can acquire users at a lower CPI. Same as text assets, call to action in your video like install now affects the install rate a lot, and it is much better to have a voice for it as well. Lastly, please include different types of videos. You should try a variety of the lengths and themes. In many cases, including your app screen is effective. Now I'll hand over to China team.
Hi, I'm Dabin Lee from Korea App Dev team, and the first vertical to cover is education. There are various subcategories under education vertical, and among them, language learning apps take the highest share of global education in-app purchase revenue, rising at the average of 36% per year. If you look at the graph, the in-app revenue marked $1 billion in 2021 and even bigger, $1.6 billion when we account for various other education-related apps. And out of all revenue in 2021, language is the largest subcategory, taking up to 52% of total revenue. And in terms of the growth rate, driver's education is the fast-growing subcategory with 47% compound annual growth rate. If you look at the education vertical in terms of the download growth, however, language learning has remained flat. The total download decreased in 2021, but it remained higher than 2019. And 2020 was the year with the highest download share. However, if you look at the last 5 years of data, language learning app downloads remained with a quite stable growth rate at 2% per annum from 2017 to 2021. The download growth was primarily driven by teaching resources, and this subcategory increased in demand due to high school shutdowns and remote learnings during COVID. In this education vertical, the US is the top market for language learning apps by both in-app purchase revenue size as well as the growth rate. The US is the fastest growing country among top 20 countries at 65% per year and taking up 30% of global revenue. The Great Britain is the second place by the growth rate, remarking 52% per year, followed by Canada, which is 48% per year. If you're targeting other countries except for the US, consider those two countries. If you combine the shares of the 4 English-speaking countries, it takes about 41% of total revenue, making the top market group by both growth rate and size. However, when we enter the US market, there are things to consider. The first is that winning iOS is critical in the US, and especially more so for language learning apps. More than 70% in-app purchase share is taken by iOS and more than 65% in downloads in 2021. If we compare these numbers to the US in general, we can see that it's 13% higher in in-app purchase revenue and 1% higher in downloads. Since it has much influence in in-app purchase revenue, winning iOS is crucial for the revenue as well as profit. Among many language learning apps, multi-language and non-English apps account for the majority of revenue. If you look at the graph on the left, we can see that about 85% of all apps are multi or non-English language. These apps include Duolingo, Babel, Rosetta Stone, and Busuu. However, what we can notice as well is that even though the percent of English-only apps might be small, but the compound annual growth rate is 76% higher than that of non-English apps. Top apps for the English-only apps are like Lingo Kids, EWA, and Cake. If you look at the language learning apps landscape in the US, we notice that there is a very long tail with over 40 apps generating more than 50K downloads in 2021. And if you look at the longer tail with 10K to 50K downloads, there are more than 120 plus apps. These top apps can be categorized into 3 types by download size. Major apps with over 1 million downloads, non-apps with 100K to 500K downloads, and lastly, niche apps with below 100K downloads. The apps in the major category are mostly multi-language platforms. However, there are 3 apps that are English-only learning apps, which are Lingo Kids, Cake, and EWA. The second tier, non-apps mainly consist of English learning apps. And in this segmentation, 2 Asian learning language apps are also included, and the 2 languages are Korean and Japanese. Lastly, the niche app segment consists of various single language learning apps such as sign language, Japanese, Korean, Spanish, and Arabic. And one of the interesting things is that the interest level in learning Chinese is very high in the US. When you look at the top quarters for language education, Spanish is the highest, and the second ranked language is Chinese. However, when we look at the top US Asian language apps and download numbers, we can see that the download number is much higher for Korean and Japanese, while the top Chinese learning apps download is only 24K. What this means is that there is a high demand with a low supply for Chinese language learning, and it's a great opportunity to bring specialized Chinese learning apps to the US. So let me summarize the key takeaways. First, the major US language learning apps is dominated by the multi-language giants such as Duolingo and Babel. However, the recent success of innovative English learning apps does exist, such as Cake, and this can inspire the new entrants. Second is that the US demand for Asian language specialty apps is fast growing. And this is proven by the success of Tuda, which is a Korean app, and Kaizen, the Japanese app. And despite the high potential interest and demand in Chinese language learning, only a very few apps exist that it's a great opportunity to tackle. And in some entry opportunities for Asian developers are, first is that English learning apps with innovative feature. For example, Cake has adopted an AI-based pronunciation correction. And the second is that Asian language specialty apps, especially the Chinese app, with a highly differentiated value and feature that stands apart from multi-language apps like Duolingo, can succeed in US. For example, the learning Korean through K-pop is a very special feature. So this summarizes the education landscape in the US, and let's talk about how we can apply Google AC solutions to education apps in the US.
Hi, this is Nayeon from Korea Active, and I will cover how to penetrate into the States and how to scale your user acquisition. After launching your app, you can leverage different solutions that Google provides. The first step is to launch AC install, and the average CPI for AC install is from $3 to $3.5 for education vertical in the US. And you can calculate the overall budget for the launching campaign by multiplying the CPI and the target number of users. You should try to rank higher on Google Play or App Store because the US market is one of the largest end markets in the world. And if you don't have enough brand awareness or impression, it's hard to acquire a legit number of users at the first stage. After focusing on the install for the first 2 months, you will utilize AC Install Advanced or AC Action campaigns. The popular in-app events for education vertical are sign up and in-app purchase. And similarly, you can calculate the budget of the actual CPA from AC install campaign multiplied by the target number of users. After having enough active users and audience, we recommend running an AC engagement campaign. The recommended audience size is more than 250,000. As Tabin mentioned earlier, iOS accounts for 65% of the total downloads. So launching an iOS campaign is a must in the US market. The most important events of education advertisers are sign up, tutorial complete, and in-app purchase. However, you should take different approaches for iOS and iOS. For iOS, because of the ATT enforcement, it's hard to track deep funnel events such as in-app purchase. Therefore, it's better to use Install Advanced with Fire-based bidding for iOS to capture more signals for your iOS campaign. For iOS, we recommend using AC Action with Fire-based bidding because Firebase will acquire more users who are most likely to take target actions by using the similar audience function. Google Display Network, which includes both image and video, has the largest cost share among the network. Google Search and YouTube Videos networks have a similar portion as 25% for each. If we divide the cost share by asset type, the most popular assets are texts, and the rest of them are video assets. When we combine both charts, we can conclude that the videos are the most important asset because they can be distributed through both YouTube videos and Google Display Network. In the later section, we will focus on the text and video assets data to discuss further creative strategy. Let's deep dive into each asset. The first section is text. For text, headlines have over 50% of the total cost share, and up to 20 symbols have almost 50% for the target length, a text length. If you think about English text assets, it means that it doesn't have to be long, but should be catchy and require more direct call to action in the text assets. For video assets, the landscape video drives more than 60% of the total installs. But the interesting thing about this chart on the left is that portrait video has more than 30% of the total install, which means the portrait can catch eyeballs of the mobile users more efficiently. The view rate shows this evidence more clearly. The view rate of portrait video is higher than the others, and it is recommended to upload some of landscape videos and at least one of the portrait videos for the United States market. Lastly, in the education vertical, relatively longer videos such as 20 to 30 seconds and more than 30 seconds videos are popular. A lot of education advertisers are using testimonials or app review videos of influencers. So that is why the longer video leads to more installs compared to the other short form videos. However, short form videos are better at improving brand awareness. So when you plan for the video asset creative strategy, please use short form videos to improve your brand awareness and increase the interest for the app. And please use longer videos with testimonials and app reviews to engage better with the users. I will hand over to the next section, finance. Thank you for listening to the education vertical insights so far.
Thank you. So now I'm going to talk, as I promised, I'm going to talk a bit about finance and fintech in the US. We first want to look at how fintech apps are revolutionizing the US as far as finance is concerned. I'm sure you all have heard of a lot of news around Robinhood, Coinbase, crypto, etc. But what does it all mean? How does this all piece together in the US market? Let's have a look at it. So this is a very interesting graph. What we've done is we've tried to divide fintech, because fintech is a very broad category. You can keep subcategorizing it, but we have around 6-7 subcategories here of the fintech vertical. And we've tried to compare the growth, year-on-year growth from 2019, 2020, 2021. We all know that 2019 to 2020 was a massive shift because of the rise of the pandemic. And we want to look at how this has impacted fintech. Now, if we look at 3 specific verticals, which is what I have chosen, we see that lending, stocks and investments, and cryptocurrency are 3 verticals that I've selected. These are also the fastest growing verticals. Specifically cryptocurrency. If we look at crypto, we can see that the growth actually has been phenomenal. A very interesting point about fintech when it comes to trying to understand a fintech app and trying to compare it to social app, we see that there are many differences. One difference is actually the method of generating revenue. As we all know, I talked a lot about IAPs and subscription, etc. But we need to understand that fintech apps do not rely on advertisements or in-app purchases in order to monetize. They monetize through third-party sources, through their own platforms, from user registrations and direct bank transfers. So in this way, we can only compare a fintech app to other fintech apps in terms of downloads. Now, let's look at what sort of countries, show a lot of promise as far as fintech is concerned. On this graph, we have weekly active users and download in millions for the year 2020 versus 2021. And when we compare these 2 years, we see that three markets, specifically India, Indonesia, and LATAM, LATAM consists of Brazil and Mexico, show a huge growth. Other three markets, more mature markets, we see Korea and the US are also growing very fast, and Malaysia is on a declining turn. Now, when we look at the US market, there's some very interesting points over here. So let's only look at crypto stock trading, or what we call is new age fintech that has risen from California. What we see over here is crypto apps have grown from quarter on quarter almost 1,000%, right? And we see stock trading apps also growing very fast. But if we actually go into yet another subset of crypto apps, we see that crypto only apps have actually grown very fast when it comes to advisory apps. Now, what are advisory apps, right? Advisory apps, an amazing example is CoinGecko. These apps talk about crypto. You can query a lot of cryptocurrencies. You can see a lot of news, a lot of trends, tips shared, etc. What you cannot do on crypto advisory apps is buy and sell cryptos. They only talk about cryptos. Now, this has a lot of advantages, right? One big advantage is regulatory barriers, because if you're not trading cryptos, all you're doing is just talking about the crypto market or cryptocurrencies. You do not require as many licenses as a traditional company would, where they're actually dealing with money, fiat currencies, or cryptocurrencies. So that's a very interesting trend within the crypto world. The other point is, of course, when we talk about stock investments, we see that Robinhood is a clear leader. Now, what we see is in Robinhood, it's grown phenomenally. There's been many factors for the growth of Robinhood, right from the meme stock rally that happened in early 2021 to the growth of cryptocurrencies, because as we know, Robinhood also allows trading of cryptos as well. And as I mentioned previously, one of the biggest drivers of the growth of Robinhood has been its appeal towards millennials. One thing I really loved is reading the Robinhood newsletter. The newsletter is full of memes, full of puns, and a lot of jokes, and it's very lighthearted, something that a millennial can easily understand and get into, as compared to traditional banks where newsletters are thrown with jargons and a lot of numbers that millennials might not find very comfortable in going through. So these are some very interesting points when we look at the US fintech market. Now, talking about cryptos, let's just take a quick step into the world of crypto, and I'll give a couple of quick insights on the US crypto markets. One, I love this graph. This graph basically, again, talks about different generations. We have Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, and the reasons as to why they have never purchased crypto. So this is in the year 2021. Why have they not purchased cryptos, right? Actually, most of them, have a very similar answer. Around 70% plus in all four categories say that it's because of the lack of knowledge. It's not because it's not mainstream or it's not a good investment. Of course, a lot of people worry about many factors such as legality, but a lot of them just don't have enough knowledge. So one very important point that I always stress for any crypto or any financial app is have some sort of a platform where you can educate your users as to what is the world of crypto or lending or any sort of financial instrument. How can they go about it? How can they understand what is risky, not risky? Financial education is extremely important as far as any new fintech platform is concerned. Next, we look at, we go into audiences yet again. And the graph on your left talks about what sort of audiences are interested in crypto. So it's essentially male millennials have made the highest share of crypto investment. If we look at males between the ages of 25 and 34 in the US, almost 15% have said that they have invested in crypto. Average American share was around 5%. So we can say that this demographic, which is males between the ages of 25 and 34, have an index of 3x. That's an extremely high index. Also, what I love looking at is what kind of um, interests do these audiences have. So if we only look at the US audiences that are interested in crypto investments, and we want to know what sort of hobbies or what sort of things do they like, we can see that almost 14% are business travelers. So we can say that crypto investments and business travelers, sports players, car buyers, and mobile payment users have a very high affinity. You can go through the graph and look at certain points that really stand out and can appeal to a platform when you try to go into the world of fintech. Finally, I am going to leave with one last slide where we talk about fintech apps in particular. So when we look at the first graph on your left, from the year 2020, we saw around 8 million app installs for crypto apps. But in year 2021, that became 41 million. That's a growth of almost 4x. And 41 million is a huge number when we compare it to the baseline population of the US. When you look at the top three apps, Coinbase is by far the largest app and is the market leader, but other competitors are catching up real quick. We have Crypto.com and Binance, which are at number 2 and 3 as far as the app market is concerned. When we look at the websites, it's slightly similar as well. We look at the Coinbase being by far the largest website for crypto trading when it comes to the US. Now, the interesting fact over here is that 30% of users that visit Coinbase actually use the mobile web. So this means that any crypto product that actually goes into the US has to think about product development on three fronts: app, web, as well as mobile web. And that's a very interesting suggestion that I can actually give. So with this, I'm gonna call it the end and pass it on to my colleague who will take you through some other verticals. Thank you so much.
Okay, now you have already know the market dynamics. We are going to give you a couple of tips to help you improve the ads performance. And the first one, very important one, is choosing right actions. So I want to highlight those 3 actions in lending vertical, like loan approval and pay and reapply. Those 3 are very important, but they all happen on the server side. So in Google, using Firebase, server-to-server solution can help you to capture those important actions. And and that's the first one. The second tip is actually about using right campaigns at different stages. Please click the slide. Yeah. So for the very first stage, when you launch your campaign, it's very important to collect user data. So we suggest you to use AC install campaigns to help you to get as many data as you need for the next stage. And over to you, Mike.
So during the growth stage of the app lifecycle, advertisers should allocate more budget to app campaign for action to drive higher funnel in-app events such as register or apply for loan actions. And the KPI should be smoothly moved from CPI to CPA for the in-app events, which matters to you.
And if your app has entered a relatively mature stage where you and your team may mainly look at ROI at this time, we recommend you consider driving your existing installed high-valued users back to the app by adopting app campaign for engagement. And also for the new user acquisition at the maturing stage, try our AC for value, also known as ACTOS campaign, mixed with AC for action campaign to continue drive new valued user.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alex and Wendy, to point out the importance of event selection and app lifecycle strategy on finance vertical. So now I will move to app campaign strategy for finance vertical while exporting to United States. So while we have many app campaign products to choose from, we can see that the majority of finance advertisers will spend around 80 to 85% of their budget on app campaign for action to drive transactions or in-app events inside of your app, which matters to your finance business. But if you can precisely set conversion value by leveraging server-to-server solution, you can further leverage TROAS bidding for driving high ROAS users to install your app and to complete the high-value in-app events inside of your app journey. So for exporting to United States, you may need to stay focused on Android users while spend 30% of your budget on iOS. Well, these might be different across different sub-verticals within finance vertical. Feel free to reach out to your Google rep to discover more detailed sub-vertical insights. So while viewing the chart on the left corner, we can demonstrate that exporting to the US is definitely the right choice for the finance vertical. While England, India, Indonesia, and Canada will be your next step. So along with the app lifecycle, the first 25 to 100 month will be the key timing for user acquisition. So according to the data insights, the time duration between 25 to 100 months after your app is launched will be super important to leverage Google Ads to promote globally in order to attract more users to your app. Now I will turn to Wendy for more insights on creatives for finance vertical.
Thank you, Mike. I'll talk about creative. So many developers have asked us the same question: what kind of creative can get more exposure opportunities in the US? We can tell you that an ad that attracts both viewers and attracts to Google's variety of networks has this following characteristic that we talk about. One is the description font needed to be very obvious. Two is there are sometimes real person interpretation, actor or actress in the video or image. And at the same time, three, it shows the classic user interface of the app itself. So tell your design team to start producing more of creatives with these factors, and you should be good to go. So let us click on the examples to give you an idea.
1 in 7 children does not have enough
Hunger
food
is
to live a
entirely
healthy and
solvable.
active life.
What does it take to global hunger? All it takes is 80 cents and a few taps on your phone. With the Share the Meal app, you can share your meal.
So in the US for finance apps, the benchmark cost by asset type is shown here near the bottom right. Although we see a clear weight difference, a reminder for you from us is that we do hope you to make a perfect asset coverage while running ads in the US. App Campaign is actually aimed to find you the next cheapest conversion. And we never know at this moment where the next cheapest conversion may come from of your campaign. It may come from text or image or video. So always following the best practice is highly recommended. So here's the campaign tips that we run for US FinTech. Thank you. So off to our colleagues to give you more user growth insights on Tools vertical.
Hi everyone, I'm Tara. I'm from IGT team, which is stand for International Consultant, similar to what my colleagues Neil and Dong Yun have been shared earlier. I will cover tools and utility apps in terms of market insight and what are the observations that we have seen for US market. Hopefully that will be value added for your strategy and planning accordingly. Right, so as you can see here, we have the like what we're going to cover is there will be three main points. You can see here this is global trends, right? And then later on, I'll go through what are the like devices or categories that are rising in US market, right? And what are the top apps, for instance, that are like gaining a lot of traction in terms of both downloads and revenue for in-app purchase. So it's overview, industry view. We have looked at the revenue of in-app purchase from 2017, which is in the back last 5 years. As you can see in the blue blocks, is that stands for US, right? So it's pretty much concentrated at top heavy. So only 5 markets already, like for example, US, China, UK, Japan, and Germany already hold almost 60% of global IP revenue. Whether US is within that, US IP have grown as strong signs of steadily rising and reaching almost 4% of global in 2021 alone. Secondly, another point of view, like whether what are the more of like cluster that you also one can test on. UK have a highest IAP growth rate among the top markets, that at 48% per annum. So definitely growth and volumes are there for US. It ranked at least the highest and also one of the strongest growth across these top regions, right? So next, we'll have understand you or know what is the revenue potential headroom potentially like. Now I want to have share with you guys the overview of downloads for the another indications for our ads funded business. So as your right hand side here is the representation for downloads, and left hand side is IIP in millions, and downloads also a bit indexed in millions. And this is data from last year across countries globally. So you can see the blue side on the top, on the farthest right is India, and the red, bubble on top is US. You can see US is second largest in terms of download, just behind India, almost reaching 200 millions by, or we can say really close to 1 billion mark as well in 2021, right? And also at the same time, revenue growth is by 37% year on year, is way beyond the global average, that almost reaching 7 millions in total in 2021. Right, so headroom is there, opportunity is there. The question is, what's next for us and how can we go enter? So definitely, I'm also looking at the what are the operating systems that can be suitable for potentially for your app portfolio. What is already working well that you can also export further to US. From the donut chart here, the blue side is representing App Store from Apple, and the left side, the red side, is representing Google Play, which is Android. So I can see most are quite winning. Both is important, but it's skewed lightly toward iOS system, roughly around 56%, and for both revenue and downloads compared to all apps. So it's compared to other app, which is all of the other verticals. Actually, there's a fair share, and uh, iOS still skew more towards for that. So how can we have tests? Work with your managers, growth managers to test different system and also test different apps and different campaign best practices will be relevant. Now we know what is the revenue size at the global view, or the download side of the global view, and also what is the operating system that gonna be hold a strong key for US. Next, we have vertical deep dive, which is a definition of what are the vertical arising on the trend. So you have 5 market here, and US will be identified as the top. on the as you see the number of growth. So the orange colors stand for IAP growth, and the blue box here is stand for downloads growth. So there are four verticals, sub-vertical that we are analyzing. I can do quickly about the definitions of this. Mobility enhancement is standing for all the tools, right? That help you to control your environment at home. Lifestyle management, however, is tools that add value to life. For example, save time, help communicate, like clocks, alarms, calculators, XYZ. And then we have device enhancement. It's standing for tools that add value and functionality to a phone. For example, screen capturing tools, network connectivity, file converters, XYZ. And last, we have device management. It stands for tools that manipulate the system to help elongate battery life. For example, storage and backup, system management, privacy and security tools. Like it's mainly Android based right now, but in definitely finding new ground also on iOS. Right, so you can see that among this, mobility enhancement have the highest growth on both IAP and download growth at 86% and 8% respectively. Right, so definitely this is one of the highest growth in terms of in the past 5 years, and this one we're gonna go. That's why we're gonna go deep dive to this sub vertical. So in here, there's a lot of number here, but I will share out the key message. So number one, the population with the population of 300 million people, definitely is a headroom for us to expand all of the tool categories. They have exceptional IAP growth of 12 times from over the past 5 years, at least grow by 80% year on year since 2017, and among which location tracking apps have its most successful package. And I will share with you what are the top location tracking apps later on as well. But however, definitely we're seeing the biggest growth in 2020, but slightly decline, slow down in 2021, but still there's still a upward trend, right? With the with downloads, remote control app have the highest in terms of share wallet, roughly almost 50% of totals. And screencasting, we see the highest growth. Right, so if we looking for ads from the business, definitely remote control and screencasting will also be another two vertical that we can focus on. And there's also top player that we rank by IP revenue, and here you can see this by millions in terms of revenue size. So it's also again quite similar with the global trend. Is quite top heavy centric, which is 22%. 22 companies record on like 1 million plus in IP revenue in 2021, and 70% of the vertical, that also coming, revenue coming from them, and among which Live 360, which is under location tracking, account almost for 30% of total. So you can see that there's a big player dominating the market, and there's a lot of diverse advertiser and developers also want to enter the market. Right. So we can go to so now we know location tracking is driving the highest growth by IP. And then here is a quick view in terms of how is the revenue contribution across sub verticals that play out. You can see on the left hand side, location tracking, which is on the yellow box here, account almost for 30%, 80% of that revenue in 2021. However, a remote control are the leadings in terms of downloads. So these are the two vertical where you guys can have to potentially test out and also focus in if you guys want to have the headroom for ad revenue and downloads. Right. So what are the sub vertical, what are these operating systems and also country. Now here's a top list in terms of top app, which cover my point earlier. With the majority top developers are actually US based. There's still opportunity for Asians developed from APAC, to explain whatever working potentially in that you can see from China, Japan, Korea, definitely can also test it out in US. And the also main focus for top apps is also mainly from purpose of tracking their family safety. So you can see the location tracking is famous. And also at the same time, we also see another trend saying that for young people, there's a big trend in US that tracking for device, for example, airport trackers, have almost 1 million download by just last year, right? So definitely people want to find a losing device. I have 2 AirPods and I lost one of it already. So definitely this is going to be useful tools to use, right? So as you can see in summaries, US is one of the top countries globally, both in terms of revenue and share of wallets, and it's growing over the year. And operating system in US is mainly both iOS and Android, but skewed toward more to iOS. So how can you have a strategy there as well is important. And definitely downloads grow with top app is skewed toward like location tracking is leading into revenue, and IAP is leading by remote control. Ads funded is leading by remote control. So how can we have those strategies and more detailed approach? Definitely, we happy to work together with Google Account Manager and our team to provide you further details. And thanks for this. And next, I will share this session to the next speaker, which is Hua, going to share more about the app's best practice.
Hi everyone, my name is Hua and I am the Growth Manager from Google Singapore. Today I will be talking about the best practices on setting up a UA campaign for tools and utilities. Now, for an average app cycle, we would split it into 3 stages: launching, growing, and maturity. For each stage, the focus and the goal should be different, and thus the relevant Google solution will be different as well. Now, first, let's take a look at the launch stage. We should focus on driving install counts as well as building user knowledge. And so it's natural for the app developers to set up the foundation clearly with building creatives, integrating Firebase, and running AC install campaigns. We'll be talking about this a bit deeper in later slides. Once you've got the ball rolling, it's time to grow the business and focus on driving quality users through identifying critical user journey steps and utilizing action campaigns. This is also the time for developers to start thinking and introducing IAPs or in-app purchase options in their apps, especially for the US market, since this has a high preference toward high quality paid products. Now, lastly, let's take a look at the maturity stage. Here, the main focus of us will be on sustaining the product while optimizing for the lifetime value of our users. This is when solution like engagement or TROAS campaign can significantly drive up the user value in the long term. Next, let's take a look at the creative trends for TNU vertical in the US market. In terms of the campaign type, you can see that majority of the ad spend is on AC and value campaigns. Now, this is critical for new developers to take notes because a lot of them are still relatively new and still focusing mainly on install campaigns, which is not advised in the long run. Next, you can see that Android is still the dominant platform for TNU in the US, as well as the asset types. Surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, GDN is still the dominant network, but search will always be a relevant channel since it is a driven user demand. Last but not least, in terms of ad network, you can see that surprisingly, video is preferred over image asset for the US market specifically. I think this might be coming down to a storytelling kind of aspect where people want to focus more on the video, right? Now, let's switch it up a bit. This is the famous Pyramid of Giza. Isn't it so beautiful and magnificent, right? I want you to think of your business as the pyramid. Now, Like any other structure, if you want to build it tall and for it to stand the test of time, it would need to have a strong and steady foundation. And that foundation is Firebase. I know it's been repeated numerous times already, but Firebase is very critical if you want to scale up your business. Firebase helps to provide reliable data inputs, and with reliable data inputs come reliable data outputs. These data all together will become critical knowledge for you to analyze and to understand your user base, helping to scale up the business the most efficient way. Right. Biking. I think most of us here have been through the experience of learning how to ride a bicycle. When you're starting out, having those training wheels are great, as you can see in the photo, since it allows you to pick up the basics like steering and braking very quickly. However, after you've mastered the basics, you don't see the people keep the training wheels on forever, since it will slow you down and hinders your ability to master the skill. Similarly, running the business is like riding a bike. When you're starting out, it's great to have shortcuts in calculation and planning, since it's easy to understand the high-level aspect. But as your business matures, your business mindset needs to grow as well, and so that you don't hinder yourself and the business, right? My question to you is, am I calculating the profitability in an accurate way? Well, the short answer is yes, but it could have been done better, right? This method might work for lower tier markets where the user retention and user value are relatively low. But for US market especially, acquiring long-term customers are key to success. And for this to work, you need to consider many more factors in retention rate, break-even point, lifetime value, daily active users. All these things are critical and need to be considered. Now, let's end it off with some extra tips and tricks that you can feel free to take a screenshot of. And there's a few bullet points that I will not list them all out. Thank you all for coming to the event. I will pass it back to the organizer to close off.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching this session, and please do reach out to your account manager if you have any questions, and if you want the link of these slides, please also let them know, and also please fill out the poster survey and let us know your feedback. All right, looking forward to future sessions, and see you next time. Bye bye.